welcome everyone to today's episode of Cops and Convicts with Sean Shepard. I'm your host, Sean Shepard, and today we have a special guest. But before we get started, I want to remind everyone to hit that subscription button and also hit the notification bell. You help the channel grow, and it'll make you aware of anytime that we upload a new video. My guest today is a good friend of mine. He has been with the Inglewood Police Department for 38 years. His name is Scott Collins. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. So the first thing I want to get into with you, Scott, is what was your life like leading up to becoming a police officer, making that decision that you want to become a police officer?
Well, my life was like, I was pretty much right out of high school when I got hired by the police department first. So I went on I was parking and traffic enforcement, and I was already in a relationship, got married at a young age at 20. What comes kind of usually after marriage? Time for a baby. So now I got to look at something that's going to be able for me to provide for myself and my family. I had a relative, a cousin, who worked for the Inglewood Police Department, kind of suggested I come over here and try out being a police officer since I already worked for the department, and that's what I did.
So what went into that decision, though? I mean, you had other options, and being a police officer isn't the safest job in the world. And you're from Inglewood, right?
Yes, I grew up in Inglewood.
So was there any pressure on you from your peers about becoming a police officer and coming from Inglewood?
There was, I didn't know about any apprehensions then. I knew my thoughts always were that I always thought I wanted to help people somehow, some way in life, to do something good to help people. And I've always felt this was a good way to do that. I wasn't even thinking about police officer in the beginning. Truthfully, I was thinking about becoming a fireman, but this was where my direction went, and I just kind of fell into it. And knowing that, a lot of times, what do? We deal with people and being police officers and helping them throughout crisis situations. So to be able to say you help somebody and to get the fulfillment out of that, I thought that was a career I wanted to go after.
So being from Inglewood, what was the relationship like between the Inglewood Police Department and the residents of Inglewood?
Right. Well, I mean, there's, of course, where I grew up in a neighborhood where there obviously were gangs and drugs around. Not specifically right where I was at, but kind of surrounding where I lived. So you can't really get outside of it. So I knew a lot of people that maybe didn't go the same direction as I did. So, of course, their attitude towards cops was already a different thing. So yeah, thinking about that and then coming on the force, I knew, people were going to look differently at me. I didn't realize how much until I got into the position where a lot of people really, don't want to really associate with you at that time.
Talk to me about that, Scott, because we've heard from multiple members of law enforcement that once they made that decision to enter into the profession, they lost friends and family members didn't want to spend time with them anymore. Did that happen to you?
Yeah, I would say, but I don't know if it's ever where you really lose. You're going to lose some people. I lost people I thought I lost, but along the way, along the years, and when they saw the kind of officer I was, and I like to think that I never really changed from the person I was, that they still continued to be friends. They may have had some apprehension at the beginning when I first came on and really didn't associate with me then, but seems like they came back around in the end.
What do you think that's from, Scott? Why do you think that you could be friends with somebody and you take a job, this particular job, and then they don't want to be around you anymore?
Obviously, it's the negative reputation or the interactions that happen between police and community in a lot of different instances. We see it on cameras now, a lot of the different interactions that people have. I mean, I had some of those growing up where I got, had not so great interactions with police in my growing up. So, I mean, I understand that, but again, I always felt that I'm going to be me. It's out here, you're out here enforcing the law, trying to do the right thing. And that's what I'm here for.
So when you put it that way, Scott, you said you're going to be you. Who were you as a person? You said you wanted to help people, and that's why you got into law enforcement. But who were you as a person? What were your likes, your dislikes, some of your hobbies? What were you doing with most of your time before you became a member of law enforcement?
Sports. I was involved in all sports. Growing up, played Little League baseball. I went to Catholic school all my life, from first through eighth, and then high school, all 4 years of high school. Um, like I said, I played sports, Little League at a young age, started at 7, 8 years old playing Little League baseball. Graduated to playing basketball at the youth leagues in Inglewood, Rogers Park, Darby Park. Then got to the point where when I got to high school, St. Bernard High School, I did play football, ran track. I played baseball early on there. And that's, football's always shaped my life. So I've always been part of the team, knowing how to be a team member, the disciplines of the team, knowing everybody on the team has a job to do, and that you have people to answer to as far as your coaches. So it just directly translates into any job you go to. You're going to have a supervisor who's going to be like your coach. You're going to have team members, your fellow workers. So when you look at it that way, it's already shaping you in life to go into when you're going to get into the business world and start working.
So you wanted to help people. You spent a lot of time playing sports in a team environment, I might add. Did that expose you to different types of people? Like what were the demographics of Inglewood back then? And when you played on these different teams, were they homogenous from an ethnic standpoint, or did you have a mixture of people?
No, it's mostly black, because I was African American. I actually played Little League at Holly Park, which is in Hawthorne, off of 120th and Van Ness in Hawthorne, California. So it's right down the street from me in Inglewood, right next door, Hawthorne is. And I played at Holly Park. Actually, a lot of my coach, one of my first coaches, when I got to the major leagues in Little League. So that's when you play like the Little League World Series age and all that stuff. I think my coach was an ex-gang member, but he was our coach. So there was a lot of gangs around the park, but if they knew you played sports, you didn't really get messed with for that. Even at the age of when I was playing Little League baseball, when I got a little older and went to the next level between the 13 to 15-year age, I started coaching the Little League team. So I'm just out of the Little League and I'm in what they call the senior league, 13 to 15 years old, but I was helping coaching teams at the younger ages. So even on my block, with the kids on my block, I coached a lot of the kids. I always would come back with what I learned and try to pass it on to them to teach them different avenues of sports. So I was always into helping people, mentoring, coaching, stuff like that. That was my early life.
So what makes me curious, Scott, has a lot to do with what we've heard from a number of community residents when they talk about problems with law enforcement. They feel like you have different members of law enforcement coming from different backgrounds, different cultures, and they're coming into neighborhoods that they know very little about and learning on the job. And it has created a lot of friction and sometimes violence in communities of color when you have white police officers patrolling that neighborhood. I haven't heard anybody complain about, really, quite frankly, any other ethnicity of officer other than that. Do you think that there's something substantive about the notion of having an understanding of a different ethnic group or community before going into that community to police them?
I think definitely the transition is going to be a lot easier if you go in and understand the atmosphere, the environment, the cultures in those communities, and you respect them and you try to learn them and try to, be a part of them. You got to be a part of it. This is your community. No matter if you live here or not, you have to feel like this is home. This is my home. Even though I grew up in Inglewood, I don't live in Inglewood anymore, but Inglewood's still in my heart. I love Inglewood. I honestly can say I love Inglewood. I love everything about it. I love everything about the tradition. This is me. I am Inglewood. You can't say Inglewood without putting my name in it. So when you come in these cultures and when you talk about the different racial ethnicities, now I've seen where you have African American officers that don't really function well in these communities because of maybe other things, but then you have white officers that come in because they come in and respect it and adopt it and want to learn about it. You know, you have the ones that can come in here and function and do a good job and really uphold the community and uphold it in the right way.
So let me ask you this. You never had to make that adjustment. You're from Inglewood, you understand the culture, you understand the people, and you said something that was very profound. You said you had white officers can come into that community or any ethnicity of officer, and
Right.
they walk in respecting people as people. And you said you've seen some cases where you have black cops that didn't do so well in Inglewood. Talk to me more about that. Do you think that that had more to do with the individual person and who they were, and more to do with that than for them to blend in visually because they are black and they are in Inglewood? Tell me more about that, because I haven't heard very much about that.
Early on in the beginning of my career, I could say it was more of the pressures, the peer pressures within the organization that you might work for. So you may have when I came on in Inglewood, it was more older white cops here. So they might have went about policing a different way than I might see.
Meaning what?
There were times where you know, we see now with things that go on in the streets and a different type of enforcement. Sometimes using force that I didn't think was really necessary. And if I don't get involved in that because I don't see fit, I grew up in this community, I know it a different way, then they may label me as, oh, he's scared to get out here and get involved and interact. No, I'm not scared. It's not what I choose to do. It's not what I think I should be doing. And I'm not going out here trying to throw my job away for some other idiot that I might be working with. So those kind of things, but you will have, I don't know if it's still, because I'm not in the streets anymore. I'm far removed from the streets now, but the pressures that can create on a young officer who maybe doesn't have a mind of his own or is strong enough to say, no, I'm not going to do that. You know, and they fall into that. And what does that look like to the community? It's like, man, you're just like them. You're worse because you're one of us and you're treating us like they've been treating us.
So are you talking about physical confrontation? Are you talking about uses of force that you think were excessive?
Exactly.
All right. So, you know, KRS-One many years ago came out with a song called Black Cop. I don't know if you've heard it.
I don't think I heard that one. I've heard some of the other things about other ones about cops, like the NWA one, but I don't remember. And I listened to KRS-One back in the day, but I didn't remember that song. So
one of the lyrics, one of the lines in the song sounds like what you just described. He talked about black cops showing out for the white cops.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
How long did they last in the department?
Well, again, if I think back on it, at some point it catches up. So some may have been able to mirror or mask it or get away with it for a while. I think eventually most of the ones that were that way had caught up to them, or either they got moved along or they got fired for something that came forward, you know, from what they've done, from their activities out there.
So Scott, what you're really alluding to is law enforcement culture. And I know you can only speak on Inglewood PD because, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the only department that you've ever worked for.
Only one, yes.
All right, so I'd like you to describe for me law enforcement culture back when you first got into the profession. And then when you're done doing that, I want you to describe law enforcement culture now.
Okay.
right? So 38 years ago, when there was no social media, people didn't have camera phones. Talk to me about law enforcement culture as a Black male officer in a predominantly white male police department in Inglewood, which was mainly comprised of Black residents.
Yeah, I think if you think about, I mean, we used to call it, for some of us African American officers, Black officers, it was a good old boy network, the good old boys. So they were kind of, you would say, they kind of ran the agencies in the protocols, maybe if they're a policy or not, the way we went about policing was definitely different. And obviously, this is going to be before the community policing, which really brought about the change if officers accepted community policing. So this was, it would depend on the officers. Again, like I said, if you're strong enough to stand against that stuff, but there was things that went on that to this day, probably people will be getting fired for, like I said, the force that probably wasn't necessary. I mean, things come out nowadays where, we look at cases now in court where people were under arrest for crimes they did not do. Well, how does that happen? Is that an officer's written report or them collecting evidence to suggest this, or however they put the package together, which then is not just the officer, because now it's got to go through a detective and then to the court system. So things were set up differently, and policing was different. I think it was more along the racial lines then. We were coming out of, if you talk about 70s and 80s, you're coming out of the civil rights eras, and some of that's still carrying over in those decades. So, what is the movie when you watch on the movie Hurricane with Denzel in it, right. And they arrested the two brothers. They said, two brothers. He said, wait, us two. He said, 82 will do. 82 Black guys will do to put you in jail for this crime. So that kind of stuff did go on. I don't know if it, ever caught up with everybody that went through, but I'm not gonna, you can't cover your eyes to the fact that stuff did go on. I mean, it's been documented through history, and now a lot of this stuff is coming up with technology has changed, DNA evidence is coming up to prove people, innocent on crimes that they may have been booked in for when they're totally innocent. So now, fast forward to the era now. I mean, I think some of this stuff probably still does go on a little bit, not as much. I mean, like I said, community policing came in. Not everybody accepted it. Not everybody wanted to do it. Again, that goes back to what you said in the beginning. If you're not coming in, accepting the community you're working for, or understanding it, and really being involved in it, then you really don't want to. A lot of them didn't want to pick up on community policing and doing that. When in this era of policing and in this era of the world, you got to have community police together to be able to do the job and police an area, nation, and community correctly. If we don't have the community involved with us, we can't do it.
Why do you say that? If you don't have a good relationship, if law enforcement doesn't have a good relationship with the communities that they're serving, why is that a detriment to the profession? Why does it make your job more difficult?
It puts us back to us versus them, okay? And then if the community, put us in our communities where we all live. How do you want your community to be? You want it to be free of crime. You can get out and walk your dog. You can not have to worry about, being shot at. I mean, in this world, that's kind of hard to do because there's things that's happening everywhere nowadays. But in your community what's safe and what's not safe. And that's going to come from, if there's a crime, people have to get involved, and you have to police your own neighborhood sometimes. And that means being a part, cooperating with the police, helping us, clean the problems up off the street. And that's going to come from the community's help, because they have more eyes and ears on what's going on. They have a finger on the pulse more of what's going on, because a lot of these things happen when obviously we're not around. We come in after the fact. So the community people have to be involved. We understand, and I understand totally how getting involved can cause problems for people, okay? we're not going to be able to be there. When you talk about witness protection and all that, I understand that. And all we can do is the best job we can do, and maybe there's areas that the courts, the justice system needs to look at to even improve those areas. I mean, I don't know how much we worked on those areas, but at some point you get fed up and you got to say, hey, you know what, enough is enough, and we got to take control of our own community. And that's going to come with all of us working together, or it won't work.
So what I'm hearing from you is, if the community residents don't like you, don't trust you, don't want to speak with you, they're not going to be able to provide you with information to help solve crimes that have taken place in their neighborhood. Now, I also heard you, I heard you when you said this. There's some people in the community that don't want you solving those crimes, and will have an issue with anybody in that community giving information about a crime that went down. I heard you. You didn't say all that, but I heard what you said, right?
True.
I just want our viewers to make sure they understand what you're saying is
Yes.
that there has to be a healthy relationship rooted in trust, so that there's an open line of communication, a two-way open line of communication, so that when something does happen in the community, someone's robbed, a violent crime is taking place, you want to catch the person who is damaging the community. If they don't provide you with information about what they saw, what they heard, that makes that community less safe.
Definitely. And it's going to continue, and they have to start thinking, I might be the next one. And if I'm the next one sitting here as that victim, do you want people to come forward and answer and provide that information so we can hopefully take this problem off the street? I would think so. So that's sometimes what people got to remember also. And there's always a way, if you don't want to come forward, you can call anonymously. I've gotten a lot of anonymous calls through the years because I know people, like I said, I grew up in the community. So I know people on both sides of the track. And I get people to call me all the time. Hey, man, this is what's going on. Even, this is what's happening in the community. They may not want to give a name or whatever, but this is where you need to look. That helps.
Is that the protocol and procedures within your department? So if someone calls 911 in Inglewood, is that 911 dispatch? Where is that 911 dispatcher at?
We have a communication center in our station.
Okay, so let me ask the question differently. I live over here in the Westchester Inglewood border. When I call 911, where does that call go to?
Well, who polices your area? It might be LAPD polices your area, so
Okay,
we'll go to their communications. Right.
So I'm saying, if I live a half a mile east of here, now I'm in Inglewood.
Right.
So if I call 911.
It comes to us.
Okay, so.
Unless now, I don't know if it's still happening. When you call 911 on your cell phone, it used to go to California Highway Patrol, and then they transfer to us. I don't know if we're still doing that, or if they've set it up technological wise, is that the right word? To where it comes directly to us. I think now they do, but don't quote me on that.
I'm just asking the question because what you said brought back some memories. I've called 911 a number of times, not because I had a life-threatening emergency, but the dispatchers seemed very, very intent on getting my name, right? And at times, I gave him my name, but I wanted to know, why do you need my name?
Right.
You're saying that the Inglewood Police Department allows for anonymous calls, but will they automatically ask for the caller's name?
They're going to ask always. That's going to be, that's part of the chain of evidence. That's part of the call history. That's part of the history. If there's a crime, we need to go back to who reported this to us, because it can't just come out of nowhere. We have to have somewhere where this reporting came from. So, I mean, if it's an anonymous caller, then that's what it is. It's an anonymous caller. But if they can get your name and info, that way they can contact back if there's any other questions that we might need to ask once we've either got on scene or after the fact. Did anything else happen, or do you have any more information that could help with this? Then they want to be able to call people back and just kind of confirm things also. So, I mean, that's part of it. getting involved and being willing to come forward and do those things.
So Scott, there have been times where I've made a complaint. Cops arrived on the scene near my house.
Okay.
Why are they asking me, the caller, for my ID?
Well, again, cops want to know who they're talking to. We want to have but I mean, you don't have to provide your ID if you don't want. So again, if you want to remain anonymous and you make that upfront, then they should go with that, okay, and respect that. So, I mean, that's just a form of, we want to know who we're talking to there. So if we got to refer back, is this going to be a witness or not? A lot of times we might get information provided to us and it may start off as nothing huge at the time, but it turns out to be some kind of big crime investigation that we end up having. Well, who did you talk to first? Oh, well, he was over there, but now he's gone. So if you left, but I got his information, so we can contact him back because he's the one that told me what was going on. So it's got to have a starting point or a reference point to how do we get caught here? How do we get to this point? So it's really for the reports at that time.
Well, I want our viewers to hear and pay attention to what you just said. If you call 911 and the police show up at your door asking you for your ID, you just shared, you don't have to give them your ID.
No.
Well, I want people to know that because a lot of people don't know their rights. And a police officer, I've never heard a police officer who's pulled me over or detained me take the time to tell me what my rights are, right? So when the officer asked me for my ID, he did not say, oh, you don't have to give it to me. It's well within your rights to not give it to me. Now, if he said that at that time, I'd have felt more comfortable giving him my ID.
Right.
But he made it seem like I had to give him my ID. And that's where people mistrust police officers. And I've had cops tell me, listen, our MO is to get your ID.
Yes, of course. We want to know who we're talking to. And like I said, if something happens, then we can refer back. But again, that's the law. By law, you don't have to give me your ID. Now, obviously, at some point, if you get detained and later arrested, then obviously we're going to have to identify who you are. But at this point, you're not detained, you're not arrested. I mean, if they pulled you over, maybe they should come up. And a lot of times it's, what did you pull me over for? Well, you went through that stop sign back there, so I pulled you over to write you a ticket. So now I'm gonna need your ID to write the ticket. So but a lot of times in our profession, if we just communicate clearly and explain to people what we're doing and where we're at and what's going on or why we're stopping you, why we're investigating you. Hey, I got a call of a car. Your car matches the description. Now, I mean, that people think generally, yeah, that's funny that you just said that. But there's a way to determine that. You can pull up the call history of this officer to see, hey, was that the case? There's ways to prove that. And people don't always go back to check that or maybe not even know to check that. If you have a complaint against this officer and feel like you were profiled. Was I profiled? No, he did have a call. He was working a call where this car matching the description of my car they were looking for that type of car. So there's ways to find out on that.
So what you just described based on the information that the officer received was criminal profiling or identifying a suspect profiling, as opposed to racial profiling, because you just used the word profiling, right?
Right.
And if you don't mind, I'd like you to describe the difference between racial profiling and criminal profiling.
Okay, racial profiling obviously is I'm just pulling you over because of your race. Your race may not fit this area you're in, or may not fit the type of car you're driving. I think you should be driving. Again, that's my opinion, but that's more racial. You think that for whatever reason, I'm pulling you over because of your race. Criminal profiling, obviously I got information that a crime occurred, and this is information on any information to describe a car, a person, or whatever. The male Hispanic with a black baseball cap turned backward and a white t-shirt. Okay, that's what you got on here in your car. So is that, that those are the things that should be looked at, or that's why, that should be the reason why, there could be the reasons why you get pulled over.
You made me smile when you gave an example of an officer pulling over somebody because you're driving a car that I don't think you should be driving, right?
That's happened to me.
Explain.
I had an IROC, a 1980 IROC Z, a royal blue one that I bought. I got it built from the ground up at DeLorme Chevrolet that used to be here in La Brea and Inglewood. They don't exist anymore, but built it from the parts up. But I had this car, and I lived in Carson at the time. I'm driving home. I had one of my young kids in the backseat in the car seat. I'm just driving down the street in this car, and I got pulled over. I mean, I saw the cop. I stopped at every stop sign. I was not speeding. I'm on residential streets. I got my baby in the back of the car seat. He pulls me over right a house before my house. And I'm like, what did you pull me over for? He said, I thought your son got off the car seat. He's still strapped in the car seat. And I'm like, okay. He said, you got a driver like this is a nice car. I'm already seeing where this is going. This is a nice car. How'd you get this car? I'm like, I worked. Not even telling them who I was at the time, but.
Oh, you were a cop. You were a cop when this happened.
I was a cop, yes. A young cop. So again, that's what I'm saying. People don't, this happens to us too. It does happen. So eventually when he found out I was a cop, oh, why didn't you tell me that from the beginning?
Why should I have to? Why are you pulling me over?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why he's pulled me over. What happened? What am I doing? What have I done? I knew I stopped at every stop sign. I saw him. So I made sure to stop. So he didn't have a reason to.
Well, I had a friend that I used to work out with, white guy, and he had a Mercedes. It was dropped down, kitted up, chrome wheels, and he got pulled over by a white cop. This is in San Diego, and he had dark tinted windows. And when he rolled his windows down, the cop said to him, "Oh, I thought you were black."
Yeah.
What does that have to do? What does that have to do with this traffic stop right now?
So he just profiled off the car, and probably I don't know if it was a neighborhood too, but
I don't know what neighborhood it was. This kid lives in Pacific Beach, which is
okay.
white.
Okay.
And he's white, right?
But the car just fit the profile.
But I'm saying he's the only person that has told me as a white person that they were mistakenly profiled
for black.
Now, he didn't tell, I don't remember the outcome of the traffic stop. I just remember him telling me that.
Wow.
And
that's not surprising. That's not surprising.
Well, what's surprising to me is that he shared the story with me, right? If more people like him who had that happen to him shared that publicly, it really does put more of a spotlight on law enforcement that is not just us people of color saying this and people think that we're exaggerating. There's all these other people over here that were mistakenly pulled over because of the car that they were driving. And when some people are shocked, they're not even filtering. The truth comes out of their mouth. And he told them, he said, I thought you were black when I pulled you over.
Wow, yeah.
So I want to go back to when you first got on the force. The demographics were, I'm assuming they were very different then from now.
Right.
How did they accept you in the department? Did you feel comfortable? Did you feel like an outsider, or did you feel like I'm wearing this uniform and we're all wearing the same uniform? We're all part of one big family working toward the same goals?
There were times where I felt comfortable and times where I didn't. So feeling comfortable, obviously playing sports most of my life. When I come on department, there's athletic teams. We have softball, we have football, tackle football. Used to play the fire department all the time, and we have some basketball. So I was kind of, obviously, I gravitated towards those activities, extracurricular activities at work. So a lot of the older officers would played on those teams. So that helped me obviously in acceptance wise. But I had some times where you could feel the color lines being, drawn in there also, where there was a time where I got written up for a haircut here
You got written up for
because
what? For what?
a haircut. I had my hair freshly faded. I had 2 lines shaved in the side of my head. I had a white sergeant come to me and said, "What's going on with you?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" "Your haircut. Are you black or blue?" I said, "Well, I'm blue. I'm black first. I'm blue because I wear this uniform, but I'm black first." And he said, "Well, what's up with that haircut?" I said, "It's a young African American, the way we cut our hair nowadays." "Well, I'm gonna write you up, and if the chief of police says that's okay, then you know, then I guess I have nothing to say." So I got written up for a haircut. And turns out the policy covered my haircut. I was within policy. I mean, other part of the lines, the parts shaved in my head, it's a military cut, military haircut. When you get a fade, a faded haircut, as long as it's lined up, evenly graduated, that's what they say in the policy, has to be evenly graduated into a fade. But yeah, so you see some of those things happen. There's other things too, but that's just one example.
So would you say that over time you felt more comfortable, more like you belonged in the department?
I would hope that over time, as long as I've been there, I helped shape some of the things that have changed in the department. I hope, things have changed, times have changed. Shows like or organizations like yours, having technology advance to where people are now seeing things that maybe they didn't know existed before because of everybody has cameras everywhere. You're able to record stuff to see some of the things that went on that people have complained about all their lives. So things have had to change, if you know what I mean on
that. We're in a large city.
Yes.
There was a sign, and I've never seen a sign like this until I came to Los Angeles. It's over in Ladera, where
okay.
Where Pan's Diner is at.
Yes, I know where that is.
It's a big old gentrification banner or billboard, I should say.
Uh-huh.
It was talking about Inglewood. So when you're in this big city and there's a mixture of people, how does the department have to keep up with a changing demographic of people? Was there a consciousness on law enforcement's part to do that? Or did people speaking out, media, cause that to happen? Or did law enforcement make the adjustment themselves?
I think all of it, all at the same, I would say all of it happened. I know I've had partners that have worked in recruiting, and especially they put African American individuals in there to try to recruit African American applicants into the force. We wanted to get females at a time, more females at a time, more Hispanic officers at a time. So there's always an emphasis on trying to keep the department, ethnicity up with what the community is, because that way you have a better representation. It helps with the community relations, and it helps with understanding what's going on in your community and being a part of it. Easier to be, more, it looks like more of an easier, I don't know if I would say a more easier transition, but if you're trying to mirror your community, then you're kind of trying to fit in here. I would think that's how people look at it. But all those things, community pressures come about where they want to see more of certain race of officers here or gender of officers, so that's always coming out in different forms and different times. Usually when something happens, something gets involved and it's, it's more, how would I say, the eye is more placed on that part of the hiring process.
Scott, I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I have a couple problems with that. There's two sides to every coin, right?
Okay.
When you have a department, whether it's like a large department, whether it's San Diego Police Department, I spent 25 years living in San Diego, or LAPD, and they come out
right.
and they make it known to the Black and brown community that we've hired, 70% of our new cadets are Black and brown. And I'm like, so what? Why are you telling us that? What do you think that's accomplishing? Because historically, let's just take LA historically, since we're here.
Okay.
When we saw Rodney King getting beaten down, I don't remember how many cops were there. They were all white.
Right.
Beating on this black guy.
Right.
So you go out and hire some Black and brown cops. How's that solving your white cop problem? How is that solving the problem? By bringing in more of these people over here, what are you doing to address the problem that's over here?
Well, could we say that's two separate things? If we got a problem with
it is.
It doesn't matter what color officer with the Rodney King thing. Whatever color officer was, that was wrong altogether, no matter what race was involved in that.
Absolutely.
So I think as far as what we're hiring, when we look at as time goes on and we have our recruiting pool and kids growing up, let's compare it to Major League Baseball. They're not getting the African-American influx in baseball anymore like they used to. Because do you see as many African-Americans playing Little League or anything like that? Well, in police, if they see more people of color working in their agency, in their areas, like, hey, that is a job I can do. I see somebody that looks like me, I can do that job. So hopefully that keeps the door open where we will still continue to get those applicants. If they stop seeing them getting hired, then it's like, okay, that's not a job for me because I don't see anybody that looks like me there or anybody that acts like me or anybody that talks like me in that field. So you got to keep that open too in that sense.
I understand what you're saying, but my problem goes deeper than that.
Okay, let's go deeper.
Because I work with a lot of different law enforcement agencies.
Of course.
And I know the chiefs have told me that their agency doesn't have any people of color on the force, because I didn't ask why. I was given an excuse. Well, our recruiting, it was hard for us. Okay, the people in your neighborhood, predominantly white, and your entire agency has officers that are white, male and female. Not one black person on your force. So you just said something. If you're young and you're looking at a profession and you don't see anybody that looks like you, subconsciously or maybe very consciously, you say, well, that profession is not for me. I don't see anybody that looks like me there. Well,
right.
It's not like those neighborhoods or that city in particular didn't have any people of color in it. Your entire agency is more reflective or almost mirrors your city from a demographic standpoint. We have white residents. Our law enforcement agency is predominantly white. Like no black people. All right.
But that's not the case for their community. They do have black people in the community.
Sprinkled, but not enough for the agency to say we need to recruit more black officers. See, my problem is whenever we are creating segregated environments,
You're creating problems.
You are. Because lack of exposure to one another creates problems.
Yes.
So as a chief, I don't care what your neighborhood looks like. Your work environment should be diverse because it allows for that exposure to happen between your agency and the community. I want to give you an example.
Let's look at that though real quick, like, because you brought that up and you talked to that chief. Did he say what was their pool of applicants? Are they getting those officers coming in? Are they even looking for that? Did he see the problem?
But it's a catch-22 situation, Scott. You know that. I'm not trying to be the Jackie Robinson of your department.
Right? I get it. Yeah.
Right? So I'm saying, if you're looking for a job and you look at City A and you do your research and you find out there's no people in that department that looks like me, why would I want to go work there?
Exactly.
What environment am I stepping into?
That's very true.
So it's a catch-22 situation. Right. He
and
said,
ultimately, now, I mean, the police agencies want to hire the best officer candidates you can.
Right.
Now, do they all happen to be white, or is that all the pool we're getting? All people applying, like you said, and somebody looking over there and saying, "Hey, that's not for me. That's not my people aren't there. I'm not going there." So I mean, seems like there's a study that needs to go into what's going on there.
If you really want to know what's going on there, right? If you really want to do an audit of your department, and if you're the chief and you look around and say, this isn't the department that I want,
right?
Then you will go about changing the demographics of your department, whether it's male, female, black, white, Latino, Asian, gay, straight, whatever. That's on you, right? So the example that I was going to give you is in San Diego, several years ago, they hired their first Somali police officer in the history of their department.
Okay.
And the Somali community was excited. They thought that he was going to get assigned to their community. He was not. He was not.
Mm-hmm.
And they were disappointed. And I asked them, I said, well, why are you disappointed? Do you think that if they assign him to your community, that he's going to let some stuff slide when he sees you?
Right.
I said, have you ever thought that this Somali, who is jet black and Muslim, he might be better served to go work in a white community because they've never been around you.
Right.
Let them get exposed to your culture and have him serve them, help them, and change whatever their thought process is or whatever their preconceived notions of what a Somali is, to change the result of exposure to him. And it blew their mind. They had never thought of that.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
They had never thought of that. So for that police chief in that city that doesn't have any people of color on his or her department, serving a predominantly white community, you are doing that community a disservice by not allowing them to get exposed to different people, and you have control over that.
Right. You're right. That's true. And that's something that sounds like a self-reflection there for him, and then a departmental reflection. You know, the self-reflection for that chief.
Well, this particular chief that I'm talking about, he resigned and went someplace else. Right? Where he could have made a difference.
Right there.
But there's another chief who may watch this podcast
that'll hear this.
And what I'm describing is his department and the city that he works in.
Right.
So let's get back to what we were saying previously, where I said I had a problem with that. Yes, hire a diverse group of people to work in your department, right? So that your constituents or the communities that you're serving, a police officer is a police officer. They're not going to be alarmed or shocked by any type of police officer coming and helping them with whatever it is that they need help with.
Right.
What I'm saying to you is we've had a number of youth here in Los Angeles during game changer events think that a solution to the problems that they're having in their community with law enforcement is to stop sending white cops into our neighborhood. Just send black cops into our neighborhood. And I've said to them, that's not going to happen, A, and B, that may not solve the problem that you think it's going to solve. It may create some other problems. But the fact that they think that goes back to my original point. You have a department that's saying, we're hiring minorities, we're hiring women, and that's gonna better the relationship between your neighborhood and us. But you're not addressing the problem that is making these kids say, maybe we shouldn't have white cops in our neighborhood. You're not addressing your white cop problem. Getting more black and brown cops is not addressing the problem that the community is sharing with you, that we have a problem with your white cops. What are you doing? What are you doing about it? And the response is, oh, we'll go hire more black cops. You're not addressing the problem that they brought to your attention.
Right. That's true. And how do you address that? Again, it's something we've talked about on your show, understanding the culture, the atmosphere, and the traditions of the people you're serving, no matter what race you are. How are you going to be able to get involved and do anything in the community if you don't understand it at all?
Or trying to understand it.
Trying to understand. Exactly.
You said, Scott, you said that there are cops that don't buy into this community policing thing.
Right.
I don't want to understand them. I don't want to get to know them.
Right.
That's problematic.
Very.
I don't see how agencies are addressing those particular officers. But then again, there's not a whole lot of agencies that have community policing that is interwoven into their culture. So, for example, LAPD has the Community Safety Partnership, which is all about building relationships between law enforcement and community residents.
Okay.
That's not pervasive throughout the department. That's a small segment of the department.
Right. But it just started, right? That part?
Relatively new, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it had other forms of it, but this is a newer version of it, correct?
As is usually the case, the Community Safety Partnership became a bureau.
A bureau.
After George Floyd was murdered. So we had to have another heinous act occur before change took place.
Right.
And now my understanding is Karen Bass, the new mayor, has mandated that the CSP model be introduced to the rest of the department.
So now
I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you do that. But that's what she said. She wants to see, evidently that model works.
Right.
A lot of officers don't believe it. They don't want to do that.
Right.
The CSP officers have told me they've been ridiculed by other officers for becoming a part of that bureau.
Yep.
So that's why I wanted to ask you about law enforcement culture. You can only speak to Inglewood.
Right.
But you have police officer friends in other departments, not just here in LA County. I would imagine you know cops all over the place.
Right.
How would you describe law enforcement culture now? You talked about before. What is it? What is it like now?
Ah, man. Like I said, for me, not being on the streets anymore, it's but I can see there has been some changes because there's had to be some changes because of, like you said, incidents like the George Floyd thing and all that. So there's had to be changes where people have to at some point accept those changes and understand that's the way to go. But not everybody's going to go along with the program, just like in anything else. So I think there's still some resistance to a lot of those things where, you know, officers may have an idea of what they're supposed to be out here, how they're supposed to be, or what they're supposed to do, and not understanding that. In my whole career, I've been 38 years. Knock on wood, thank God, I've never pulled the trigger. That's 38 years, and I thank God for that. I thank God that I was in situations where it almost happened. So I think there's an idea maybe set forth when you come out here of what you're supposed to, what a cop does or what you think you're supposed to be doing. When a lot of times it's really just you're really out here communicating. If you can communicate with people, that will get you out of a lot of stuff. And you got to be able to communicate with all kinds of people. Nowadays, with all the mental health stuff, we got a lot of mental health issues, and being able to communicate with people and having patience to do that. You have to have patience to be able to do that. But I think there's been some change within. There's been, some things still stay the same. I could say that, no matter how much change you think happens, some of that stuff still stays the same, or else you wouldn't see people out here getting in trouble. Or you understanding like, man, what was he thinking? How did he do that? This officer go out here and just, use force on this person that was caught on camera here. What was he thinking? And I think that's some of the people that that have resisted change. And that's probably the way they've always been. It's just now been captured.
Two things you just said. I know older cops that have said exactly what you just said, Scott. I've been a cop for 30 plus years, never pulled the trigger. And they're looking at today's younger cops and shaking their heads. Now, I'm not making a blanket statement. And I'm not saying that that's the case across the board, because we've seen older cops. Derek Chauvin was not a rookie.
Right.
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 But I've heard that from older cops, black, white, and everything in between, that they're kind of tripping on what they've seen on television and how these younger cops are going about their business.
Right.
That's the first thing. The second thing you said happened to do with mental health. But you were talking about mental health with community residents.
Yes.
Talk to me about the mental health of the officers.
Yes. I mean, you got to understand, obviously in this job, in this career, you see a lot of things that are very traumatic. And we have to take care of ourselves in order to be able to keep doing this job and to be able to, keep doing what we need to do as far as living life. So you're going to see a lot of things that you never thought you would ever see. If you're not mentally strong or continuing to get the proper help, trying to stay in the best healthful or health situation you can be in, staying in some kind of shape and getting the help when you need to, talking to people, talking about the things you see, and keeping that in the back of your head where it just builds up and makes your brain, explode into something else. You can be a mental health casualty yourself. Look at a lot of the things that we see and a lot of officers have seen has something they couldn't get over. There's times where I've heard officers get to a scene where there's a infant that's dead or deceased or has passed, and they picture their own kid at that time. That's mental. That's very stressful, and sometimes they can never get out of their mind, out of their head, and they can't go on any further in this job because every time they go to a call or any situation, they think that's what they're going to see, and they saw their own kid there. So the mental health part of it is very big in our job too, and the majority of cops that have died have been by their own, by suicide.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up without me having to mention it, that the leading cause of death within your profession is suicide.
Exactly.
It's not bad guys killing you. It's not traffic accidents. It's you guys killing yourselves.
Exactly.
So let me ask you something. If that's well known within the profession and our elected officials know it, on the local, state, and federal level. How come really next to nothing has been done to mandate some sort of ongoing checks and balances with people in your profession to ensure better mental health and well-being, so that there is no trickle-down effect? Because in your particular case is quite common. Male, got married, you had kids. If your mental health is suffering as a result of your profession, that's not just going to stay in a vacuum. That's going to trickle down into your family life.
Exactly.
And to how you do your job.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So
Definitely.
why do you suspect that there's been so little done to help ensure your mental health and well-being as a member of law enforcement?
I mean, that's really for a question for, like you said, the politicians and the heads of departments and all that.
Why do you think nothing's been done?
My opinion, most of the money, I think, in policing is spent on training and equipment.
Most of the money on policing is spent in settling lawsuits.
Whoa, okay. Yeah, that's true too. So
Right?
I mean, that's probably number one. Okay, you're right on that. But I'm talking about on budgets that we look at the budget for the police department. Where's it going? Training and equipment, making sure you have the right, and it's been brought to light on several different platforms about the military type equipment that the police are using out there, right?
Right.
So people are focusing on that, when you would think, like you just said, why not focus on the mental health and the health aspect of the officers that you're putting out there on the field that's going to be using this stuff, but really on them. And what does that say to me? Maybe they don't really care about us like that.
They don't, Scott. I think way back when, even when it comes to the military, I think a calculated decision was made. Okay.
And let's go real quick.
Go ahead.
Let's look at the homeless situation. How much are they? There's a lot of talk and a lot of politicking around that, but what are they really doing to help? Because all the things that are saying or they're putting out there, everything still falls most of the time in the police officer's lap to deal with these situations.
Right.
And we don't really have the resources to deal with it, because there's really no resources put forth for us to deal with it.
Listen, I think a decision was made way back when, that when you look at the number of people in this country, we got 320 plus million people. And on average, 100 police officers nationwide commit suicide.
Right.
Every year, right? And then you're dying from other things, but nationwide, 100 cops are killing themselves each year. Around 50 are being shot and killed in the line of duty. So now we're at 150. 150 people nationwide. I don't know how many cops nationwide lose their lives by getting, traffic accident. I have no idea, but I'm going to guess a total, and this might be high. Let's just say 250 officers every year die, either in the line of duty or they kill themselves. I think our elected officials said, we can live with that.
You think that's what happened?
We can live with that because it's such a minuscule number nationwide. If that number was 2,500 instead of 250, and then I'm just taking an educated guess at 250.
Okay.
I think that would be a different story if you added a zero to that.
Right.
Because now you're talking about.
I wonder.
You and I are just sitting here having a conversation, speculating.
Yeah, we're just having right.
Because conversely, if you say to yourself, the cops are killing themselves at 100 per year, and then on average, they're killing U.S. citizens at 1,000 per year, on average. It's usually a little bit more than that, but let's just say the
Okay.
average is 1,000.
Okay.
So law enforcement, generally speaking, is taking the lives of 1,100 people per year. And we have 320 million people in this country.
Mhm.
Are they keeping my neighborhood safe? Yep. Then I can live with those 1,100 people losing their lives. That's what I think. If you look at the history of this country, that sounds nefarious, but it sounds totally plausible.
Yeah, it does. It does. It does.
Look at our armed forces.
Yeah.
We went from not allowing any people of color to serve in our armed forces, just like we went from not allowing any people of color to become to be members of law enforcement. Our armed forces went from no blacks and browns and no women to, oh, wait a minute, we can have as many blacks and browns as we want and put them in the front lines.
Right. Right.
Was that a mistake? Oh, you want to serve? Fine.
We got a place for you.
Put the front lines.
We got a place for you.
We got the perfect place for you. Come on in. Come on in.
Right.
So when you say, I don't think that they really care, I think you're spot on. It sounds good to say we support our law enforcement. It sounds good to say we back the blue, but your policies don't tell me that you care about the health and well-being of the individual, his or her family. I've had a number of police officers tell us in public, on camera, that they don't feel like enough is being done to ensure their mental health and well-being. They said, but the first day you wear that badge to the day you take it off, the cops have all told me, you're not the same person.
Mm-hmm.
You're not the same person.
Nope.
You can speak to that better than I can.
Right. Like I said, the experiences obviously, and you've been in all different kinds of situations. What should I say? Near-death experiences. You go. There's a job of a cop. You could go from bringing a life into existence to taking a life. That extreme. So, and all the stuff in between. So all those experiences, all those years, I mean, just sitting here and seeing, your eyes get open every day. And like you said, when I just said, probably they don't care about us. There's a lot of things you sit here in this position and once you come in, all of a sudden after years, you start looking at certain things and like, wait a minute, I don't like the way that goes, or that doesn't seem to be right. Whether it be like the justice system, laws that are put in place, and the way that they go about and being enforced. So it does change you. You see a lot of things, obviously, because you work within here. So you know how things work within the organization and then the systems that are put in place for them. The system, a lot of people will tell you the system is kind of screwed up.
So with you saying that, Scott, if I'm a 25-year-old and I come to you and I say, I want to be a cop, what things would you tell me in favor of being a cop?
In favor, I mean, I enjoy, again, what do you want to do? Why do you want to be a cop? If you want to come out here and really help people, then you can do that and you can really feel the effects of that. But make sure you keep that in your heart. Don't ever change from that you're out here to help people and to make this community, put this community in a better place and to serve this community in the right way. So if you're coming here with that kind of heart, with that kind of thought of being here and become a part of that community, then you'll be okay. And then understanding that the job, obviously, it's not the greatest paying, but it's not the worst. And it has a good retirement system in it. So you can build up something to be able to take care of your family and take care of yourself for the rest of your life, hopefully, in the time that you're here. I mean, obviously it's not, there's other things that pay better, but it's not that bad. And I like working outdoors. I'd rather not be, I like I've always liked not being confined to a building, although I am mostly now because I'm indoors mostly. But I like being able to go out and be outdoors and working outdoors and not just have to be in one spot. Something nice about that. I can park under a tree sometime and just catch a breeze because I need a break and write my report right here. And you feel a nice breeze and you can sit there and contemplate and think. And I'm being outdoors, not in some stuffy building where maybe the air conditioning working or whatever, but you can be out and about and within the community. And people come, a lot of people see you, and even now to this day, people come up. We do have some people that still do support us or are nice to us. Hey, thank you for your service. I really appreciate you. That's always good to hear. And I always tell them, thank you, because we don't do it without you.
Okay, so what's the other side of that coin, Scott? Those are the reasons why you would tell that 25-year-old to become a cop. Are there any things that you would tell him to keep in mind that aren't positive about being a member of the profession?
Well, some of the things I talked about when I came on, where there's influences that want to influence you to be a certain way out here. You have to be strong-minded. You have to understand right from wrong and don't go down that path. Don't be led down a path that you don't want to go. Understand that your job can be taken from you like that because of stupid things or whatever you might get involved in that you don't need to be involved in and it's wrong. So you have to have a strong mind and not be afraid to stand up against things you think are wrong and speak out. That's where a lot of people know. I knew it was wrong. I knew I shouldn't have done it, but how would the guys think about me? What would they think? Well, them guys ain't gonna pay the bills for the rest of your life. You get fired. So you have to have that strong mind. You have to be, again, still stay on the right path and not be strayed in the danger areas, the danger zones that there are there inside of the business, the organization of the business.
So what's fascinating to me, Scott? When I asked you that question, the first thing that came to your mind had to do with the pressures that go with being inside of law enforcement culture. You didn't say anything about the danger of the community. You didn't say anything about that.
I sure didn't, did I?
No. And I paused to give you time to add to what you were saying, and you stopped talking.
I don't. Oh, go ahead.
No. I was going to ask you, what do you think that's about? Because I would have thought that you might have said, or that you would have said, look, this is a dangerous job. There's evil out there. You got to watch your back. You didn't say that. You talked about inside of law enforcement.
Yeah, that seems like more of the dangers that get you. You already know those things when you come in a job about the dangers out there on the streets. And if I reflect on my career now, I've been faced with those dangers. But when I look at the totality of it, I've seen more people getting walked out of here for stupidity stuff that they did than being out there in the streets working. So those are the pitfalls that you really got to look for, because you don't really maybe not see them coming. You know what I mean?
I'm fascinated by that, Scott, because you are focusing on character. You're focusing on maintaining, if you're a good person, maintaining who you are.
Yes.
Throughout your tenure in this profession.
And you'll be good.
If you walk in as a person of character. If you walk in and you're not a person of character, you didn't say this, but it sounds to me like you might be in the right place. If you're not a person of character, and you're coming into this profession with this culture,
your character will be shaped by someone else. That can happen very easily.
That's sobering to me.
Look at what's happening. LASD, right? They're talking about these law enforcement gangs. What is that? That's shaping up probably more than anything, I would assume. Now, it's my opinion, so I don't have the science on this or not, but to me, it seems like those are probably people who didn't have the strength to stand on their own, and they have to feel like a sense of belonging. Just like any other, when people join gangs or groups, usually it's because low self-esteem, or don't have that self-pride in themselves that you need to feel like you belong to something, for whatever reasons. Now there's other reasons. I'm not putting that down or not. I know a lot of gang members who I'm very close to, who I have great relationship with, and who I call my brothers. So I'm not putting that down. Everybody has different reasons, but a lot of times that can be true.
Scott, it's fascinating to me that a majority of people in this country don't know. They're not aware of the fact that there are documented gangs inside of the sheriff's department here in Los Angeles, right? And depending on which side of the aisle you sit on, you might say, well, that's Los Angeles, and they have those problems because they're a diverse community, a diverse city, and they're going to have those problems. And we're not surprised by them having gangs. But we've heard, this show is called Cops and Convicts, right? So we've had people who have been incarcerated on our show on a regular basis. And when they talk about the police being a gang, they're not talking about the individual color of the police officer. They're just talking about that uniform.
Right.
Right. So
right.
Cop could be a gang member simply by being a cop in their mind,
right.
Whether it's a white cop or a black cop, or if you're in that city that has that homogenous police department that has no people of color in it, they behave like a gang. They may not call themselves a gang. These guys called themselves a gang. They were different gangs. They had different tattoos.
Right.
But you can be in a gang and not get a tattoo and behave exactly like you are a gang member. And that's what we hear people who've been incarcerated. That's how they describe law enforcement.
Right. And I don't know if that's fair totally. I mean, I understand what they're saying because probably the interactions they've had, that's the way they've been treated in those situations. But I don't think if you really ask them, can they say that about everyone they've met? Have they not met one that wasn't acting as the way of the other ones? I mean, truthfully, if they've had experience across the board, they're going to have to say there was some that they met that weren't that. So I mean, it can be grouped into a stereotype, true, in some instances. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you don't have to apologize to me. You're touching on some great points, because our last game changer training event that we did with the LA Angels.
Okay.
Young man sitting next to me, Latino. I've never had a good experience with law enforcement. And that's not the first time that I've heard that.
Right.
And
I've been some of the game changers and heard that too.
And sadly enough, they've all been people of color.
Right.
They've all been people. I take that back.
No, there's been some way.
I stand corrected.
Yeah.
Because we've had young people, regardless of their ethnicity, say that they've never had a positive experience with law enforcement. But then they'll finish the sentence and say, until today.
I've seen that.
At game changer.
Yeah,
I've never
I've
had
seen
an
that.
experience with law enforcement until today, which is sad to me. I mean, it's great that we provided that this one opportunity for you to look at law enforcement in a different light, but what if we didn't exist?
Right.
You'd still be saying, I never had a positive experience with law enforcement. And some people, a lot of people around the country can't wrap their brain around that truth because they've had nothing but positive experiences with law enforcement.
And that could be our fault as far as law enforcement goes, because in the certain areas that these particular individuals might be, who do you send out there to enforce what you're trying to do?
Scott,
is that just us?
It is law enforcement.
Right.
It is.
But outside of that, I worked in those areas myself when I was young. But so there was a certain enforcement that went on there, but then when I worked in there during the daytime, I would talk to these. That's why, like I said, to this day, I have gang members that I know that I call that are my friends, because I've developed that rapport with them through the years, and they've grown up, maybe grew up in a gang culture, but now they're grown men, have their own kids and families and all that. And we communicate, we talk, and all that stuff. But that is, they got a different experience. I'm not just gonna. It's not for me to pat myself on the back. Don't think that's what I'm doing here. But if that's all you're seeing is that enforcement part of it, and these guys are going here to send a message or to try to be tough on crime in a certain way, meaning for using force and all these things, take you to jail for wherever they can, and all this stuff that these individuals might not agree with, then of course that's never going to be a great experience. Or if they live in a home where mom and dad or mom might be a drug addict, dad's a drunk, and every time the police get called, it's because they're fighting. So negative experience because they're taking mom or dad to jail. So what do you see? That's not a great experience growing all the way up. So if you haven't experienced the other side of it, we have community events where they might be involved with. We used to have late night basketball, midnight basketball. So being involved in those things kind of change. You can interact and see that, we're people just like you. We are people, this is just a career, job we work in, but we're no different than anybody else, So if they don't get to experience that side of it, or the police department doesn't set up things for them to experience that side of it, like Game Changer does, you bring in these entities together so people that haven't experienced that can experience maybe somebody on there that isn't like the ones they've encountered. And you say, man, this is a different kind of officer here. I can relate to it. I wouldn't mind having this kind of person in my neighborhood. So if they don't get to experience that and all they see is what's being sent in their neighborhood to enforce whatever, then that's what their idea of policing is going to come from, right?
Well, that's the purpose.
And,
that's the purpose.
Yes, that action is like a gang. What are they coming down here to put enforcement on you? Whatever way we need to do to stop you, to keep crime down, to keep you guys out of here off the street. It may not be the best way to go about it. Usually it's not.
Not when there's a time that you have to come in and be heavy-handed. I understand that,
If you have to be heavy-handed, somebody's going to give you a reason to do that. So there'll be times where you have a reason where you have to do that.
Right, I understand that. I really do. I really do understand that. I think it happens more often than it needs to. But you said something. That's the purpose of this podcast, is ultimately to humanize people who seem like they're on different sides of the law, people who have been incarcerated and people who are within a profession to enforce the law that sometimes results in people becoming incarcerated. So you may have a viewer who's incredulous at the fact that, okay, this is a police officer. He's saying that some of his good friends are gang members. How does that work? Well, it works because we're people, number one. And number two, just because you're in a gang doesn't mean that you are 24/7 committing crime.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that.
Right.
And people who come from different cultures may not understand that. And you know what? They may not understand that inside of their own culture.
Right.
Right? They may not understand that inside of their own culture, either because of ignorance, or they'll look away and turn a blind eye. People are people. I don't care what you look like. If you are a member of law enforcement, there are people that you associate with that are not squeaky clean. You know how I know? Because Allen Iverson said it decades ago. There's no such thing as squeaky clean.
Mm-hmm.
There's no perfect person.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you wear a uniform or not, nobody is perfect.
Right. Right.
I admire you for being truthful about the fact that you've been in law enforcement this long and you have friends who are not in law enforcement, and I'm putting that mildly.
I have some good friends, very good friends. And this goes back to this. Just because somebody might be a gang member, whatever, doesn't mean they don't have good in their heart somewhere. You got to try to find that and bring that out. And like I said, sometimes their situation or their current situation of what they're in or whatever they're into may not be all their fault. May have been what they're obviously a lot of times you grow up in that and you just kind of gravitate to what's going on around you there. And that may be all you know because you don't have other mentors or guidance above you. A lot of times you think about it, and for me, I mean, I grew up around it. You know, other kids that grew up with me, sports might have been the thing to keep them out of it. You know, I've had kids I coached. You know, I coached at high school basketball in Inglewood for a long time. A lot of those kids say, you know, a lot of times the thing that kept them out of that was sports. You know, one day they were supposed to go get jumped into a gang, but instead of that, they had practice that morning, so they didn't go do it. Next thing you know, they're on their way in sports. So it can be just that, you know, one side of the fence or the other. So I believe there's good in everybody's heart somewhere, somehow, some way, and you hope to find those things and just feed on that, you know, and you can, you know, and let people see another side of life that maybe they didn't see.
Scott, let me ask you something. Can you recall an incident in your career that sticks with you to this day where you didn't think you were going to make it home?
Oh, I mean, I've talked about these things a couple of times where I remember probably one of my first calls of a shots fired call. So let me just say about this. Shots fired call. It's in a known gang area. When we get the call, we end up getting there. When we get out, shots are actually being fired. And I can hear bullets flying over my head. I remember thinking at that moment, I'm a young cop. It just came on not too long. Shoot, they're shooting out here. Call the police. I am the police. I am the police. Oh, we got to handle this. So this is part of this job, to be able to come in and deal with this and handle this. So, I mean, that's, you know, I don't know. At that point, hearing bullets fly over your head, yeah, that's kind of scary, you know, but, and then realizing you got to be the one to go in there and handle these things. So, I mean, that's just one example of that. I don't know that I really had too much where I didn't feel like I was going back home. I've seen, you know, again, like I said, I've seen a lot. I've experienced a lot, and it can be a rewarding job. I'll tell you that. If you're looking for rewards, you can get rewards in the right ways when you do things. You really out, like I said, you really feel like you're helping people. Let me give you a quick story. I had one kid I coached who was on the fence and gangbanging and all that stuff. He played ball for us, but one foot was over here, one foot was on the basketball court. You know, ended up he didn't take school seriously like he should have probably, so he wasn't getting the college scholarships and all that. We were able to get him off to a junior college out of state with some financial help and all that. And kid that I really took to. I mean, like I said, one minute he's here on this side of the fence, the other minute he's on the basketball court. But when we got him, we just figured if we get him out of this environment, he'll have a chance, hopefully, to make it in life. You know, probably about 6 months after the kid was at the college, man, he called me up crying on the phone. I'm like, oh, what happened? What's going on? I said, Coach Collins, I love you, man. You're the only person that ever told me I could be something. And you helped me get to this point where I'm out here, I'm going to school, I'm playing ball, and I feel like I have a chance in life. That's when you know no money can pay for that. That's the reward right there. For somebody to tell you that you made a difference and you helped them. You know, that's an experience I never forget. And that's why I signed up for being in this job.
And I think we should end on that note.
I still get emotional on that. So
well, I mean, I would too. And I have, certainly not as a member of law enforcement, but you know, when people care enough about you and are confident enough to share with you the impact that you've made on their life, if you have a heart, it's going to be hard to not get choked up by that.
Right.
I I want to
Right.
thank you, Scott, because you're the first member of law enforcement to come on this podcast while currently being a member of law enforcement. A lot of your brethren are hesitant to speak freely about the profession while they're still working in the profession. And I want to thank you for coming on and having the courage to just speak on the profession openly and honestly while you still employed.
I appreciate that. And let me thank you, because let me tell you something, from your podcast, from your game changer events and all that. What I've learned in doing that, it's not only a chance to come in and interact with everybody, but then it gives me a chance to stop and reflect on the things we're doing inside our agencies. When I hear some of the things from the different community members that we have involved, and hear some of the officers, and I don't always agree with a lot of the things the officers say in some of the podcasts and events we do. I'm like, wow, I don't agree with that, but it gives you a chance to reflect on what are we doing, what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, what can we change, and to hopefully go back and implement and bring those ideas back to your department. So that's what you guys give us, is a chance to also reflect on what we're doing and understanding how people feel about it, and to really think about those things and maybe hopefully go back and bring some change on that. So thank you.
I appreciate it. I think that more chiefs should participate in game changer trainings, and more senior executive staff should participate in game changer, because it's one thing to listen to patrol officers who are on the ground every day and they're dealing with up-to-date problems and issues in the profession. When you're far removed from that, I think it can be problematic.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I think you
Yes.
always have to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening on the ground. Even though you don't wear a uniform anymore, you can come in a coat and tie, and you're still a member of law enforcement. You're still a cop.
Right.
But it helps to hear some of the best ideas. Most of the best ideas come from the ground up.
Right.
Not from the top down.
No.
I think top down is the most inefficient way to solve problems.
Yes. It should be from both ways, right?
Exactly.
And from the sides.
No, you're right.
Everywhere. Yeah.
You're right. You can't step into a situation and say we know what they need better than they know what they need.
Right. True.
You're not even
Very
here. You're not even here.
Very true.
And your patrol officers, how often does a patrol officer in a large agency speak directly with the chief?
Not too often.
Some people have been members of LAPD for 10 years, they've never
seen the chief.
Nope, they never have.
Never met them, except when at their graduation from academy, probably. And that was a quick handshake, right?
That's it.
True.
One last thing, Scott.
Yes, sir.
If there's one improvement you could make about the profession, what would it be?
Whew.
You've talked a lot about culture. You haven't used the word culture, but you've talked a lot about issues inside of culture.
I mean, obviously, the culture of departments has to change to match the cultures probably of the communities involved in. What's that going to take? Getting out there, understanding, being involved. It's back to, here I go back to community policing again at its best, or the other one you said LAPD is doing that they want to push through. You have to be a part. This is our community. We're all here together. We're all in it. And you have to be all in it on all aspects. Okay, so, I've had thoughts on things. I mean, right now, currently in my job, I sit over in internal affairs.
Oh.
I've mentioned some things in the past. Maybe other officers are probably gonna think I'm crazy for saying this, but what's the problem with having citizens involved in our internal affairs investigations? You have officers, we have rules and regulations we gotta go by, so they understand the process of what happens. Part of the investigation, part of the decision. I don't know if that's something that could ever be done. Maybe I'm talking about something that they can't do, But how powerful would that be to have citizens? Because then you don't just think cops are policing they're policing our own. Now you're part of it. You understand the process and you're involved in it. And obviously there's only certain rules and regulations you can go by when you're doing disciplining people. You have to have facts and things to go by and do the investigation on it. But why not?
Listen,
That'll probably never happen, but that would be something.
listen, I think that is a fantastic point of view that you just shared, because so many people think that law enforcement has this blue wall of silence, right? And
we need to break that down. We got to break that down. Break the Great Wall of China down.
Right. So listen, I'm the first one during Game Changer trainings that you probably heard me say this. Investigating yourself is not going to build trust and confidence within the community. When we don't see the process, we don't know what the process looks like. The analogy I always give is, if you're a parent and you come home, you got 3 kids and the lamp is broken, you're going to allow your kids to say to you, Mom, Dad, we're going to do our investigation and we're going to get back to you in a month, or we may get back to you in a year. And then they come back a year later and say, nobody's guilty of breaking the lamp. Well, who broke the lamp? How did the lamp get broken?
The lamp's broken, so somebody had to break it.
Somebody broke the lamp. And you're telling me nobody's responsible for breaking the lamp.
And I looked it up in the history. There was no earthquake on that date.
Right. And over and over and over again, that's what community residents have to accept from law enforcement agencies as a result of their investigation. We know somebody's dead, but nobody's responsible for it.
Yeah. I mean, my idea with that was, you have a citizen there, but how do you want to get more than one person involved? Because if you got one citizen that sits there all the time, then people think, okay, he's been brainwashed to do it their way. So you have to have, it has to be something. I don't know how we can do it, but I think that would help a long way in the lives. I mean, we have the citizen academies and stuff. A lot of agencies have that, where people come in and they actually go through academy like they're being trained, like how the police get trained. And so that way you kind of understand a lot of the things that happen. And that opens the eyes for a lot of different people. But, and you have several citizen commissions, or, commissions that oversight commissions that oversee, but they're not actually involved in part of the investigation and the discipline, right? So there's parameters set on everything. You just work within those parameters, and but I don't know, maybe get to that. You see the transparency is happening. There's a lot of different laws happening. We got different things happening. California Post now, I think we talked about it before on the show, the SB2, or decertifying cops. I mean, the thought back a few years ago of just getting rid of police overall, I don't think that's the right idea. Obviously, we do need policing in these communities, but the right kind of policing. And obviously, community needs to be a big part of that, or we have nothing.
So my takeaway from what you just said was, you'd like to see more transparency.
More transparency.
Right. And I feel like that's a steep hill to climb when you look at the profession that has always been extremely secretive in how they go about their business.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's improved, but there's still a long, long way to go. When it comes to transparency. Exactly.
There is.
Thank you for that. Your answer, I didn't know what your answer was going to be. And when you talk about, I didn't know that you worked in internal investigations. So your perspective on that process is priceless. And you're saying that it could go a long way to improve relations if members of the general public were privy to what that investigative process looked like.
Right.
And why so often, maybe not in your department, I don't know the numbers in your department, but so very few officers ever get indicted for anything.
Right.
They do. I I have a problem with that because if you look at the numbers nationwide, less than 1% of officers get indicted for anything that they've done. And what you're telling me is that profession is almost perfect. Your job, the way you do your jobs is just about perfect if less than 1% of the officers ever get indicted. And we know that's not true. So there's something going on there. And that's probably a reason why there isn't as much transparency.
A lot of that has to do with the laws that are in place too, and the system, the justice system, I think.
No, you're right. Because how often have you heard me say this, Scott?
Mhm.
Police officers don't make the laws.
Right.
Their job is to enforce the laws at your discretion in a lot of cases, right?
Right.
But you
Right.
don't make the law.
Right.
And for you to say we need to look at the laws that we have on our books on the local level, on the state level, and on the federal level. And I don't think that we've done that, not in a transparent manner, and in a manner that allows for community residents to give input. Like that law, that's an unjust law. And we've got a lot of unjust laws in this country, a lot, and we still do.
How many times have you heard them talk about the Constitution is outdated, right? The U.S. Constitution, and where do the laws come from? So if that's outdated, the laws are probably outdated in a lot of sense.
I have a friend who just got out of, he's a U.S. attorney.
Mm-hmm.
He had a pretty prolific career.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me about the number of U.S. attorneys around the country. And I asked him about those attorneys combing through all of our federal laws. And he said, that needs to happen. But if there's not a demand from the people, there's no reason for them to change.
Mm-hmm.
And we're too distracted by, you name it, to start collectively coming together and saying, well, let's look at these laws. Like, why does this still exist? So the marijuana laws have changed here in California.
Yes.
But look at the effort that it took to get there.
Yes.
It took a collective, unified effort over years to get the laws changed.
Could you feel the resistance through those years also to it?
Could I feel it?
Yeah. Could you feel the resistance to bring those laws into place, that people didn't want that to happen?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can feel that resistance.
Like marriage equality.
Yes.
There was just as much support as there was backlash for marriage equality in this state.
Yes. Yes.
But the law changed because conscientious citizens came together and demanded the change and voted in change. We need to look at, if we knew, part of it is ignorance, Scott. If we knew the laws on the books, we'd be able to look at them and say, well, why is that there? In some states, they haven't outlawed lynching.
Right.
Well, why not? Is lynching a good thing? You know. Hey, let's end it. Let's end it on that note, man. All
right, brother. All right. I appreciate you having me on here, man, today. I really do.
And we have to do it again, Scott. You really provided some great insight, and I'm looking forward to getting this up and creating clips around some of the more interesting points that you made during our time talking. Everyone who watched, I hope you enjoyed. Again, please hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and Scott, 38 years and counting. God bless you, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.
You too.